Chats. Today is Wednesday, February 23rd, and it's time for the Chair's Daily Live. Happy Wednesday. Happy snow day. So it's a snow day, and so I have a special guest with me today I'm kind of excited about. But before I get to that, I want to remind everybody that it's Public Education Week at the Capitol, and we're going to talk a little bit more about what that means and how that affects decisions made at the Capitol, how that affects public education in our state with my special guest. I'm going to tease you a little bit and talk a little bit more. Yesterday was February 22nd, 2/22/22, and we had a statewide phone bank where we were calling all over the state for some candidates, school board candidates. So we got in on the Public Education Week, helping candidates get elected. It was very successful. We hit our target goals. We will be doing it again. So be on the lookout. Go out to our website, go out to our Facebook page for the next opportunity for you to be able to participate and join us in calling and helping candidates get elected, because that's what we do, right? We got to help Democrats get elected. Now, for my special guest, this is the first time that I've had this person on my live, and it's because they're always in the legislature. So today, with it being a snow day, I thought I had a good opportunity to get her. So from Stillwater, Representative Trish Ranson from House District 34 is joining today to talk about Public Education Week at the Capitol. So could you tell us what Public Education Week at the Capitol means?
Good afternoon. Absolutely. I love Public Education Week at the Capitol. We have teachers, administrators, parents, activists, supporters, students, all of the above come to the Capitol to advocate for their public schools. And, about 95% of our students attend public schools. So it makes sense that we have such a outpouring of support. It's also a shame that we have to constantly advocate, but at the same time, it really does offer some really great conversations. And for me, I'm a person who, I live in an orange town, and to go to the Capitol and to wear red, it's a wonderful celebration, because I even had to buy red this year because I'm like, I don't have any red in my closet. So it's a wonderful time at the Capitol.
So I invited you particularly today because you are an educator legislator. You came from the classroom. And so you're part of the Education Caucus?
I
am. So there's a lot of things going on, right? Our state legislator, the majority party, is pushing vouchers. So,
yes.
A few minutes ago, you said about 95% of our students, of our scholars, go to public schools. So why the push for vouchers, do you think? Because you talk to them every day.
Well, it's interesting. I get more support around me for public ed than I do push against public ed. The narrative of parents having a choice, I think, really has come out of the pandemic. We have been, all of us, our lives have been turned upside down. We've had loss in our families from family members who have perished from COVID-19. Our work schedules, our life schedules, our school schedules are completely upended. And I think what happens is we're all just so very fearful. And we want to make sure that our children have the best options, and knowing how experiencing distance learning has been a trial for a lot of our families. And so this push to what's best for my kid. And I totally get that. I am a parent of 2 public school grads. They're off to college now. And I understand that mama bear feeling of wanting to make sure that my kids are taken care of. But as an educator, I want all the children to be taken care of, and not just mine. And that's one of the things that, it's a different in perspective, as opposed to, keep making sure that my own are taken care of, but also making sure that everyone's is taken care of.
So you say difference in perspective, which is why I'm glad you're in the legislature and I'm here, because I think they figured out a key word. They figured out language that gets people riled, because to say school choice and parents have a decision, I believe the parents have always had a decision of where their kids can go to school.
Oh, absolutely. And parents are an active partner in the education of their children. It should never be a parent drops their kid off at school and then just says, okay, I'm done. It's still part of the process, and making sure that parents have a way of plugging in and getting involved. I mean, that was the number one thing that we talked about every year in the teachers lounge. How can we get parents more engaged in the education process? So it's something that, we parents have seen firsthand, like, oh my gosh, I'm in charge of making sure my kid is learning and I have to work. It's been overwhelming. And I think that has been awakening, which I would say that every public school welcomes that awakening. Parents, come on, let's work together. We want to make sure that your child succeeds.
So I'm going to go a little tougher here. So as I understand, because I am not a parent, right? And so I follow it because I want to live in an educated society. I want to live in a society where folks have access to economic growth. And I think that education is a great leveler, be it higher ed, be it trade schools, but education is a great leveler. So as I understand it, little Johnny, my child, I don't want them to go to the neighborhood school because I think that it's not up to snuff. I want to send them to a school across town or even a private school. The $8,500 that our school system devotes to little Johnny now goes to the private school, right? And so it leaves the neighborhood school.
Mm-hmm.
So what strikes me about this is while we're talking about moving money around, and I think that our state auditor has proven that we're not the best at moving money around. So you look at Epic as being, potentially the biggest frauder of our state ever, right?
Right.
They moved education dollars around. We didn't do that well. There was not good oversight and no accountability or transparency. And I fear that we are opening the door for that to happen in more instances than this. And then, don't even get me started on the healthcare money, but it's just an example of how we don't have the infrastructure. Forget what I think about vouchers because I have an opinion about that, but we don't have the infrastructure to do this in a way that won't harm our children, particularly our rural school kids.
Okay, so you have just hit on several options about the vouchers that are to be discussed. Number one, the money. Where does the money go? Okay, I've heard lots of people tell me how much that per pupil expenditure dollar amount is, and no one agrees on how much it is.
Okay.
But everyone agrees that it's not enough to pay for a private school education. So one, why is it not enough? It should be enough. And so then that says that we are underfunding our public education system. I went to a institute on education a few weeks back, and they brought up our funding formula, and they gave our funding formula a grade. And I would not surprise you, it did not surprise me, that our funding formula was graded a letter F. So having a failing grade for our funding formula, it broke it down to the next step. And it talked about the equity of the funding formula. Now for the equity, it got a letter C. So as far as the funding formula, equity-wise, it is a better grade. It gets a letter F because we don't put enough money into it. That's why it's a letter F. So now here we have this instance of, okay, well, here's your choice, parents. You can take the taxpayer dollars, and it's not just your taxpayer dollars, it's everyone's taxpayer dollars, to educate your child, and you can take that and you can apply that to private school. But it's not going to be enough. Well, when I had little kids, I mean, really, honestly, my kids needed to go to as close as possible. And they came with me to school because that's childcare. That's an issue. It is making sure that, your children get a ride there and ride home and all of those things. We have a lot of families that are dependent upon their public schools so that they can work and they can live. And to take that out and then say, okay, now parents are going to really have to work even harder to make sure that your kids are educated. You're going to have to pay more. And honestly, I would disagree that a private education is better than public schools. So here you've got this, like, you're being sold this choice, but it's not really a choice. For me, it would be public school is my choice. And that's where, I mean, I was raised in public school. My kids went to public school. My husband went to public school. That is our choice. And the fact that we are not investing in those schools for those families who need that education for their children is a travesty.
Well, and if it's not enough for public schools, I mean, private schools, right? If whatever the number is, if it is not enough, why, another issue, and doesn't have to do with vouchers, but why is it enough for our public schools? I agree with you. We are not funding our public schools enough.
We are not. And I think what they're looking for is they're looking for a way to offset the costs. Let someone else pay for the education of children. It's way too expensive. The amount of times that I hear that our education apportionment is 53% of our apportioned budget, it's like, it is. But here's the thing. If we are educating our children, we are planning for 100 years in the future. I'm not looking at, okay, I want them to graduate from public ed and I want them to either do career tech or higher ed so they can get a job. Yes, I want them to get a job, but I want citizens of our country and our state who understand what democracy is and will do all in their power to make sure that our democracy thrives. That is the purpose of education.
Okay. So are we doomed to vouchers?
Well, I wouldn't go that far. It is an election year. And it is a divisive topic. It seems like every time there's an election year, let's throw out a divisive topic. Let's make people afraid so that way they will go and vote. I am honestly tired of the fear. Why is it that we cannot let the systems that we have set in place work? It's like, okay, if our public education isn't meeting the markers that it needs to, then what's really going on? And I'm telling you, it's not the legislators who are going to figure it out. It's the people in the schools. It's the teachers. It's the parents. It's the students and the admins who deal with it every day, day in and day out, that are going to find those answers. And if we can tap into that, then we can find some solutions that really work, not just some gimmick that is going to look great on a campaign mailer.
So, okay, I needed to get my voucher frustration out. Thank you for humoring me.
Well, you got me riled up.
So I want to end on a positive note. Do you have a piece of legislation that you want to highlight?
Wow. So as far as education, I had a bill that I wanted to put forward that basically righted the Open Transfer Act last year. I was in talks with my Stillwater Public Schools, and one of the things that they brought up was that the law was written that teachers' children could transfer into their district without any worries about capacity, but staff children weren't. And honestly, that is a recruitment tool. I mean, if you are working custodial or the lunchroom or driving a bus, knowing that your kids can go with you to school, that equalizes our schedules and our timelines and everything. And that makes a better employee to have their children with them. And so I decided, okay, yeah, we need to make sure that we open it up and let all staff children be able to transfer into a district. That'll help with recruitment. It'll also help with security of the child. But there was also another legislator who came up with the same idea, except he had a little bit more added to that, where if, let's say you have transferred into a district for 3 years, you kind of grandfather yourself in, siblings can come as well, all of that. So it was kind of he had been talking with his district as well and worked out some other things. So I said, hey, I have a feeling that your bill's going to pass. much better than mine will. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to co-author your bill. So that's what I ended up doing. And that is House Bill 3038 by Brad Bowles. And so that has passed committee. It's passed the House. One of the very few bills that we've actually heard on the floor. So it looks like it's doing well, and we'll just see how it does in the Senate.
Well, that feels like a democratic value, right? That we level it out. It's only teachers kind of feels a little bit elitist.
Absolutely.
So leveling it out. And so, allied professionals and the cafeteria lady can bring her kid there and feel like she's there overseeing. As a kid, my mother worked in my school. And so, I know that made my parents feel better. It was a pain in the neck for me, but I know that it made my parents.
Oh, yes. Having 2 teacher kids, I can tell you they were on the straight and narrow all the way through elementary school. And even in high school, I would get texts from people who had seen my children around town. It's like, how keeps you on the straight and narrow when you have that many eyes on you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that sounds like a worthwhile bill. I hope that it passes. And, good on you for recognizing a bill, even though it's across the aisle, and knowing that it's what's good for Oklahoma and signing on to that.
Oh, absolutely. That's getting credit for it is not necessarily at the top of my list. I want to make sure that legislation is good legislation that crosses over and makes life for Oklahomans better.
That's why we love you, Trish. Thank you so very much for joining me. And for those who've seen it, sharing is caring. People need to know what our educated legislators think. I think it's great for us to get an insight as to what's happening at the Capitol from somebody who's at the Capitol, who's in the trenches. So I appreciate you coming.
I thank you for the invitation. I do have a Facebook Live every Tuesday morning at 8:30, Tuesdays with Trish, on my Facebook page. So if anytime you want to hop over there and see what I'm seeing, I'm happy to share there as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And guys, I will be back here tomorrow at 4:15. Have a great one.